Good hello, welcome to another Mootable Moment. Previously, I was mucking around with this Ferris wheel contraption, particularly with the constraint system. I was only dabbling into the surface, making the first thing that came to mind upon seeing its potential, but I'm yet to really start plugging things into things and seeing what is possible from combining these building blocks together. What happens when certain shapes share constraints, pegs, and parameters with other shapes? I'm going to start with two shapes, this one sort of pivoting like this, and see if I can get this one to simply move left and right with the pivoting of the blue one, like some kind of piston arm. Now I'm guessing, like last time, that should just be a transformation limit, right? This one rotating from left to right like so. I'll give it a dramatic ease as well. So it pumps like that. And if that's parented to that one, then the whole thing will swing. But if there's a transformation limit first with its rotation to 0, I mean, a little bit. But I learned last time about it having its own pivot. Disable any of the parents first, place it there. All right, that's working just as intended. Can that be used to influence the swing of another piece attached to the other end? Green rectangle this time. Now I could just duplicate that first peg and put it onto a new pivot. You know, that will get the job done. It'll create the illusion of it working, which, you know, in animation it is all just about creating the illusion. Nothing has to work for real. But I'm being really stubborn and I want it to work for real. So if the green one is underneath, what happens then? Okay. But if I put a transformation limit on the position, then it's just not going to move at all because there is no rotation. It won't introduce new rotations on top of it. So it's probably going to have to be parented to the first one. Okay. Interesting. So what will happen when this gets a new transformation limit? And this one has all of its positions set to 0. Will that... it does rotate the top one. Good, good. So if its pivot's at the top, what will happen then? And if the pivot is at the bottom? That's working perfectly. My secret plan all along wasn't to have it at the bottom. I really wanted to have it at the top. So if the pivot was now there, what's going to happen this time? Back to front. I guess that makes sense. It is transforming in the same direction. It's just the artwork goes down rather than up. So can transformation limits take negative numbers? What if this was negative 100? Okay, that didn't work. It doesn't push it into the opposite value. It just caps out at 0. So I suppose in that case, this peg underneath, if it was flipped like that and positioned on top, of course it's going to struggle. Having everything turned off, it becomes so clear. The black box is still rotating around the original pivot. That makes sense. But there's no way that the green one can rotate around that original pivot and have it make sense. The top of it needs to be stationary, but it's moving around the widest part of the circumference. It always will be. So perhaps there is a way after all to introduce a new rotation from here where it's being simply pushed and pulled. So enough of that. Let's see if I can build like a locomotive engine that will put all of the parenting of these parts into a practical use case. I'll make a circle in the very center of the stage so it can rotate perfectly. I'll tidy this up a bit later, but just for parenting's sake, there's enough so we can see it spinning. And just like in the last example, a rectangle hanging off of it with a no rotate transformation limit, so it chuggers along. So far this is very similar to that Ferris wheel one, but I need to get it, and this is similar to the challenge I had just a moment ago, but now I have a really practical goal, is to get this end always pivoting from the same point. So it's tilting up and down from this angle, but not from this angle. The first idea is to just do it manually, set up some keyframes with a pivot here, and always have it tilt back towards the center like that. So now it does this. This is the result that I want, but again, I did have to punch that in manually. It would be really cool if this was somehow automatic, so that by rotating this top one, it will just know what to do and to tilt inwards. So it's sort of halfway there. Now the 2-point constraint seems to work because I do need a way to have it have 2 pivots. So I want this point to always be going down to there and this one to always be moving. But the problem with the 2-point constraint is that it creates an automatic squash and stretch. So the other point needs to be moving left and right just as consistently. I just don't want it to be moving up and down. So what if this one was moving with the main lot? Holy cow. But it had its own transformation limit, and this one could move along the X, but it can't move along the Y. What happens then? Okay, I always forget about moving the pivot on this main transformation, but now I've set up one of them to be moving left and right, like that. So notice it follows that pivot as it moves along the X. And this one, it follows the X and the Y. So what happens when I combine them both? Okay, not a lot in that direction, but what if I flip them around? Damn it. How can I get it so that the left sees this one and the right sees that one? Aha! At last. Perfect. Okay, solution. Pegs had to go after the transformation limit so that they rest on the shape in the right spot. Both of the transformation limits had their pivots here so that they can both relay the same rotational information, just one of them doesn't go up and down. And then with that left and right information, the one on the left just pushes and pulls the pivot from over here. It seems quite obvious now, but there's so many different places where these pegs could be sitting and they all created just different weird results. Although that seems to be working now as well for some reason, and I don't know why. Could that go there now? No. See, it will do this like sort of weird stretching and pulling because that would swing all the way around the character. Now it seems like there's a minimal amount of contorting, and I could probably refine it all the more to make it even less. If that like sat right on top of that. Yeah, now it barely looks like it's bending at all now. That's great. Now I respect that this isn't exactly a practical thing to do in day-to-day practice, but for some reason I just can't help but experiment with this stuff, even if it will never be used properly. So now to actually draw something proper around it. I'll whip up a quick train. And the actual thing seems to have a crossbar connecting across these two wheels like that. Do a little guy running away, but it sort of looks like he's sneaking, tiptoeing. Where's the leap? Guess he's got to be completely off the ground already. There we go. I'm going to build this with a huge number of layers because I'm not sure how dynamic I want to make this yet. And with these little modular moots, drawing it all separately just means I'll have as much flexibility as I want. What's the main middle section of a train called? Body, cabin, whistle, chimney, dome thing 1, lamp. The bits that go down the side. Cowcatcher, big wheel, connecting rod, piston chamber, and the connecting part, whatever that would be called, I don't know. Axle? I'm probably not even spelling that correctly. Who cares? And now, should be good to go, working my way from the bottom up, tracing over each one, being relatively clean, but not over the top. Because for works like this, embracing the imperfections tends to give it just a little bit more life and character. For the second dome, I'll do a clone of drawings only, and with animation mode off, slide it across. So everything will be mirrored about those two from now on. Quickly turn animation mode back on because I always forget. For a lot of these straighter sections, I'm leaning on the shift key. When you hold it down, it goes into a straight line, and when you let go again, it goes back to drawing normal. Use it all the time, it's wonderful. So I can draw this straight bit, and then I sort of just bounce on the shift key, come off and on, and you can get some angular shapes really quickly. Super, super useful. Completely revolutionized the way I draw, and now just in pretty much any drawing I do now has to be in Harmony because of that. It is just fundamental. I'd like to do a full video demonstrating a whole bunch of use cases for it. But I did one many years ago. If you're willing to dig all the way back to nearly the beginning of this channel, you'll find it. Still there, still works as well. It was actually removed for a little while. Or should I say just changed. It was given a different shortcut, but it sort of broke a lot of workflows. So thankfully, it has been restored. So good guys ToonBoom for really paying attention to their customers. But it kind of blew my mind at that point when I found out that this shift key thing is pretty much only used by Australian animators. Weird, right? Now remember, wheels, the only way to get them to spin perfectly from the center is to have them appear from point 0 on the stage. So to do that, I'm going to put it in a peg first. Sort of mark out point 0 like that. Move the peg down to the center of the wheel. So now my grid is down there on the wheel. Select the underlay layer. Circle to grid snapping just as before. Trace out something that is approximately the size that I want. Make it stand out, probably green. And then go back to the line art layer so it can't get interrupted. And now I just have something really accurate to trace. So I can embrace the imperfections of my stroke, but it won't be so off that it's going to pivot the wheel in horrible, horrible ways. So pretty much as long as I can't see any of the green coming out from the side of my stroke here, then I'm willing to forgive any of the wonkiness that I do. Hopefully that will just bring it to life a little bit more. Because, you know, a perfectly round circle that spins, you can't see it spinning. Slightly thinner ring through the interior that has that traditional edge going across like that. What is that? What's that for? Those pistons aren't exactly even, are they? I guess I can come back to it if they turn out to be too dodgy. Okay, same thing as before. I'll clone both the peg and its drawing. With animation mode off, bring it across to the side and do one more clone. So I might as well use this wheel for the little one here. For the front wheels though, I might have to do a fresh drawing because then the outlines are just getting too thin. It does also need to pivot from the middle though. So in that case, I'll be selecting both and duplicating the layer. Move it across. Like this is just safekeeping because I know that whatever size I make it, it will rotate the way that I want it to rotate. And if I select it all correctly, that should delete everything except for the green outline. So I can give it a fresh trace with a nice thick outline and one more clone, this one there. Time to continue on drawing. I'll add an undercarriage layer as well, just to sort of hold everything together. Okay, color and layer time. Trains like this are fairly monochromatic, aren't they? So I'll start with that, just to get all the base colors down. Probably do that actually by selecting every layer and go to apply to all visible drawing layers and paint unpainted. Let's see if that works. Bang. Haha. I saved a lot of time. All I gotta do now is reorder it. Oh, that's pretty well ready. I'm getting excited. I want to start rigging it right away, but I should probably make it at least a little bit prettier. Give it some proper shading and light tones and stuff. Alrighty, time skip. Done some shading and arranged all the layers neatly. I've built some interesting shader effects, which are all of these, and it makes everything look like this. It's all pretty now. I could probably go ahead and do an entire episode of just making this automatic shading system. It gets even more involved for these wheels as well. There's 3 different contraptions going on in order to get them so that they have the same shading as everything else. This shaded strip here, that stays still as it rotates, and you'll notice that the highlight on the edge, it sort of keeps itself updated as well. See there? As it goes around. So that should be quite interesting. But for the sake of today's experiment, that piston engine, I did a lot of further experimenting off screen trying to get this thing to work, because what is different is this piece and this piece being connected to 2 separate wheels, particularly because we're going to be doing this. getting a whole bunch of 2-point constraints, one for each wheel. All of these will be aligned to the bottom of their respective wheel and pegs into the secondary point, and each of these will have their pivot aligned to the top. Do you see where we're going yet? So now if I parent all of these top ones together, it should give me a control point that lets me do this. All of them squash and stretch in unison. So therefore, if I take the rest of the train, parent all of that together, and make it a child of this one, now grabbing the entire train should move the chassis and everything else, but stretch the wheels, and it does. So we get a nice automatic little choo-choo-choo-choo like that. This, however, becomes a problem when it comes to moving this thing around. So notice these two rotate together. Here's the rod here, and if I connect them together, we're going to get some strange behavior happening. So solution. Started disconnected from everything. Set up 2 pivots as normal, and they stretch like that. But this one with the point on the right, I'm going to squash it down into pretty much 0, which feels really weird. In all my experiments, it was firing all the way off to the side, things were turning inside out, it was really quite bizarre. But the answer makes a lot of sense. The 2 wheels are direct copies of one another. As far as the 2-point constraint is concerned, these 2 wheels exist like this. So when the copy is moved over to the right, it pulls the second point of the piston with it, essentially restoring it to its original shape. That took me about 45 minutes or so to figure out. But now they share a point, they spin together, and it is compatible with this bendy bend. To get it connected with this other one should be a little bit more straightforward, because that actually coincides with the experiment at the beginning, which involves a transformation limit from this right hand rotation. I've put a copy of the wheel rotation just here for ease of use, and set the transformation limit rotation to 0. Gets us this, which halfway there, but of course I haven't set the pivot for the actual This also, of course, needed the 2-point constraint with another transformation limit. And this one needed to also have its Y set to 0. There we go. That looks great. Completely functional and automatic. Completely unnecessary. Way longer to build than to just draw it by hand. But I'm still not done, because check this out. When it is not compatible with the squash. I rotate it again now. Ay. How am I going to solve this? Alright, I'm gonna have to put my hands up and admit defeat there. Just a little bit of chugga movement I seem to get away with that piston falling off a little bit. However, of course, as always, the working files are available to Patreons if you want to have a dig around to see how I did that shading effect, but especially if you want to have a poke around and see if you can improve on this and maybe find a solution for combining this automated piston with the 2-point constraint, moving the whole chassis around thingy. That could be a great puzzle, and I would love to show off how it could be done. This video is way over length already though, so I have to call it here. Good luck, please be in touch with your own experiments, and hopefully I'll be able to return to this project someday.